I am feeling like dog shit. Zajef feels bad because today is Women's Day. Is it Women's Day today? I did not know that. Chat, what if today I do a region tier list of how good the kit designs are? Kids design? No. Kid. Why would I be ranking kids? Now, ranking women, on the other hand, it is International Women's Day. It's time to pull out the gender tier list. I opened my phone and the weather said 67 degrees. Why did you share this with us? All right, chat. First, we can talk about 1.0 kits were actually kind of goated. And clearly, they didn't like fully know where they were going to take the combat system. So they left themselves with a bunch of possibilities in 1.0. And some of those possibilities were realized and some weren't. Beidou is a good example of a character that had a lot of potential, but just didn't really pop off because counters are unreliable and AoE content kind of got phased out. In 1.0, what was the better region for character design? Monsa had Kea, Amber, Lisa, which in terms of kit design, I think Lisa has some major issues. Amber has some major issues. Kea doesn't really have issues, but he's also kind of unremarkable in terms of kit design. Lisa energy, that's not the problem. Lisa having energy issues isn't really a design problem. It's a balance problem. The reason why Lisa has energy issues is because her skill is too bad to use. If her skill was worth using, she wouldn't have energy issues because you'd use her skill. The problem is that the skill doesn't do enough damage to justify all the hoops you have to jump through. The biggest design issue with Lisa, in my opinion, is that the hold skill has a long cooldown. And you need to use the tap skill, aka have the skill off cooldown already, in order to get the conducive stacks to justify using the hold skill. But like at the end of the day, Lisa, Kea, and Amber are the and Barbara too. Like these are the characters you're given as your like default character. In a game like Genshin, I think it's fine for your starter cast to just kind of be dog shit. Characters that introduce you to mechanic more so than characters that are meant to be used in the long term. So how well do these characters do that? I mean, they function, but they're kind of like whatever. Rasor, I mean, the witch buffs fixed a lot of his design issues, but he still definitely has some. Fischl, I have no notes, honestly. Fischl might be the best design in 1.0. She's a character that is very straightforward, but has a lot of little details, little nuances that allow her to shine in different situations. The biggest problem, I think, with Fischl is that a lot of that nuance is only at C6. A lot of that interesting design stuff only exists at C6, right? The way that with C6 Fischl, you have ways of getting a fuck ton more hits, of getting more electro app, stuff like that. But I think it's a really big shame that that's only doable at C6. Should we take points away from characters if they're 4 stars that only really do their job at C6? Yes or no? What do you think, chat? I was thinking about as many yeses as nos. We'll take a little bit away, but not too much. Then. Fischl, no. Faruzan, yes. I disagree with it. I think it's actually the other way around. The reason you put Faruzan in your team doesn't change at C0 or at C6. It's just that at C0, she's a bad unit, and at C6, she's a good unit. Fischl C6 actually warps her design in a way that can incentivize you to use her in teams or in situations where you otherwise would have no reason to use her at all. Like, I'm not saying that Fischl C6 is more impactful than Faruzan C6. I'm saying that from a design perspective, fulfills a different purpose at C0 and at C6. Whereas Faruzan just doesn't fulfill a purpose at C0 because she's bad, right? But it's not like her purpose changes at C6. She just becomes good enough at it to be worth using. I don't know. Maybe that's delusional. Anyways, Bennett, pretty good kid design. Noelle might be one of the worst kid designs in 1.0, actually. My god. Because, like, it's fine now, but back in 1.0, our options for energy generation for her were, like, GOMC and Ning. And then later on, we had Zhongli, but Zhongli gave you a redundant shield. And, like, Albedo, but, like, Albedo energy generation, lol W. Chongyun, that's not Monsat. Sucrose, yeah, I mean, Sucrose is kind of a fucking goated kid, actually. You know, Sucrose is kind of an interesting one, because back in the day, if it wasn't for Global Swirl, VV setups with Pyro that, like, swirl Pyro generally would need to, at the time, right, when your only real Hydra option was Singto, they would need to swirl Pyro before you swap to Singto. And Sugo's short buff uptime made her really not that good in those teams. Like, you get like 1 or 2 attacks out before the buff runs out. Without Global Swirl, Sucrose was actually not that good of a character. It was basically impossible for her to have good uptime. I mean, okay, Taser was still good, and Sucrose was still kind of the best driver for Taser. This was a time in the game when the top of the meta was National, and if you use National on one side, your other team was complete dog shit, because there were no good teams that didn't use either Singto or Bennett. So you had to split your National in 2 with one Bennett team and one Singto team. And the best Singto team without Bennett was just Taser. But anyways, that's not what we're trying to do right now. We're talking about kit design. I think Sucro's kit design is... It's a very safe kit design. It gives a very straightforward buff, but there are inherent limitations to it because of all the gauge bullshit shit and just elemental gauge theory in general that make it difficult to get a lot of value out of sucrose unless you start actually thinking really hard about your rotations, which I think is actually very cool. That's a result of her buff duration being short. If her buff duration was longer, I think she'd be a less interesting character. She'd be stronger, but I think she'd be less interesting. I mean, Jean got a revival with Stygian, right? But none of that is really intended design. Stygian fall damage abuse, they're aware of at this point, and they let it exist, but that wasn't the intention behind. Maybe it was. Maybe it's fair to say that it was the intention behind Jean's design. Actually, you know what? Yeah, it clearly was the intention behind Jean's design, because like her charge attack knocks enemies up and makes them float for a little bit, which makes it easier to set up fall damage stuff. Yeah, you know what? I think it's fair to say that Jean's intended kit design was always fall damage. I don't think they intended that to be an endgame mechanic when they made Jean, but I think they've accepted that it is now and they're kind of leaning into it. That being said, it's fucking cringe that it gets a lot better at C1, and god, it's so inconsistent. I think the worst part about it isn't even the inconsistency of the fall damage itself. It's the annoying ICD that enemies have at getting applied with a floaty status from her charge attack. I think that's cringe as hell, and it feels so inconsistent. Oh well. Diluc might be... What's the worst design in 1.0 between Noelle and Diluc, actually? Okay, you know, at this point, I'm going through every character individually, so we might as well just make it a fucking full tier list instead. Let's put the ones we've already talked about. Lisa, her kit is interesting, I think. But she's held back by the cooldown not really making sense for what she's trying to do. So let's put her in B. I think that's fine. Amber probably goes in C. The fact that her burst is fucking basically RNG, the amount of times it hits, is just awful. Actually, no, it's D. I forgot about Baron Bunny. Yeah, Baron Bunny is an awfully designed ability. Yeah, I think Jean might be A, honestly. She's kind of grown on me. With fall damage becoming an actually viable endgame strategy in past Stygians, I think it actually makes sense to put her here. Like, the kit is very straightforward, but it's very clear that the fall damage stuff is intended, right? Like, that's what the charge attack does. That's what the skill does. Noelle. Okay, Noelle I talked about earlier. Noelle is kind of just an awful design. The biggest issue with Noelle is that she was released before we had any, like, proper batteries for her. It's just, she's all over the place, right? She's a healer, but she needs to be on field to be a healer. And like, especially back then, her damage was fucking pathetic. Yeah, maybe the intended way of playing Noelle in 1.0 was actually supposed to be quick swap Noelle Ning, where you make sure that you swap back to Ning every 6 seconds, and you get a lot of geopower particles that way. But like, I don't know. It feels like Noelle doesn't really do anything special for that. Yeah, like, Noelle is a relic of Genshin not knowing what kind of game it wanted to be. Isn't she decent now? We're not talking about how good she is. We're talking about how good her kit design is and how cool the kit design is. And I think the kit design on Noelle is just really boring. The issues with Noelle's kit aren't like active issues. It's just kind of boring. And like, it doesn't really fit what Genshin is trying to do. Whereas Amber has like actual big glaring flaws. How does it not fit with Genshin? Because Noelle's kit is all about sacrificing a bit of offensive output so that you have a tank on field, or having a tank on field to drive strong off-field damage dealers. That's what Noelle's kit is all about. And Barbara's probably Amber level in terms of kit design. It's just so awful. Her skill cooldown doesn't fit rotation length at all. Her self-hydro app, like, people still have nightmares of getting frozen in 1.0 Abyss because of Barbara. But like, in 1.0 Genshin, when they had the leyline disorders that applied an element to you, having recurring self-app was actually very useful. You didn't want it for cryo specifically, but for the other ones, it was nice. And the fact that it was recurring meant that you didn't have to swap back to her or to time it. But the problem is, they moved away from that, having debuffs that are tied to your character being applied with an element. And that was kind of the only thing Barbara had going for her design-wise. For the rest of it, she doesn't generate any particles. Her burst costs an infinite amount. Her skill duration, her skill can't be used every rotation. It's just, ugh. Not it at all. She can revive you. Who else can do that? Columbina. Alright, Sucrose goes in A. Sucrose's kit basically screams, learn elemental gauge theory. Learn Global Swirl. Fischl, also pretty solid. Honestly, maybe fischl goes here. Like, I don't want to put fischl in the highest tier, But I do kind of want to put her above Jean and Sucrose. The thing with fischl is like she has such a straightforward kit that has so much nuance to it. I think the only annoying thing with fischl is her cooldowns where you have to alternate burst and skill. I think that's a good thing actually. It makes it very interesting. It allows for a lot of different dynamics based on your team's rotation length. As far as I'm concerned, the biggest issue with fischl is that her C6 warps her design so much. Like, she cannot be full uptime without C6. She loses a lot of her versatility in, like, utility without the C6 extra electro amp and extra hits. I think it's just sad. Should we talk about post-witch buff Mona or pre-witch buff Mona? I guess post-witch buff Mona, because, like, that's the unit we have now. But I do think Mona's still kind of an interesting design. I think with the witch buffs, they kind of changed her identity. She went from being a character that was mainly all about buffing short uptime carries, and now she's about characters that can afford to have her taking field time. I guess it's still short uptime carries though, but I mean, she's fine. I think she's kind of a cool design. We can put her here. Yeah. Where did he put Yao Yao's kid in his tier list? You think we're at Yao Yao? We're not even remotely close. We only started like 40 minutes ago. We've got like 8 characters so far. You want me to do Yao Yao now? I can do Yao Yao now. Yao Yao is a character that was kind of interesting on release, and that I think got less interesting with time, because Yao Yao came out before Farina, and before Farina there was no offensive value to healing, and healing was only something that you would use when you need to, right? If you get hit, you can heal to prevent yourself from dying. And in that sense, Yao Yao was very good at that, because her skill provides enough healing that chip damage won't really bother you too much, and her burst provides a panic button that basically full heals your whole team. The problem is that Farina's release completely changed how healers interact with the rest of the cast, because now it's pretty important for a healer to be able to give you fanfare on Farina. Yao Yao's skill healing is only single target, and her burst does require you to on-field her for a little bit in order to actually full heal your team. And because of that, she kind of feels really bad to use with Farina. Really cooked her. If you were watching me back on Farina release, you might know that I went for Beidou on a rerun because it felt like Yao Yao just wasn't doing what I needed to be done in teams where I wanted a Dendro healer. But not every team uses Farina, right? So what about the teams that don't use Farina? The biggest downside to Yao Yao's kit is that when you get hit, Yugo starts targeting you instead of the enemy, and it stops dealing damage. Now, it's not like Yao Yao does a lot of damage, but it also stops applying Dendro. And if you don't apply Dendro, then, well, she's really bad, right? She's not doing anything. That being said, that's not actually that big of an issue, because the teams where you would want to use Yao Yao because of her relatively slow application tend to just be quicken teams, and in quicken teams, you don't need to have fast Dendro. You just need Dendro once in a while. I'd say Yao Yao still has some problems with, like, duration not being that long and cooldowns being awkward for quicken teams. She's got a fairly interesting kit that has well-defined upsides and downsides, and I actually prefer a kit like hers to a kit that's stronger, but just more boring. All right, I think that the A tier is going to have 2 types of characters. It's going to have characters that have straightforward kits, are strong and make sense with what they're trying to do, and characters that have well-defined upsides and downsides. I think Yao Yao goes in A. Keqing is a very boring kit, unfortunately. Like, he has an interesting aspect, which is the extra energy he can generate when he triggers freeze, but it's just too unreliable. Is Keqing still the best battery in the game, actually? Or the best cryo battery in the game? He is, right? And he's not that far. Mandatory TT mention. I wish he leaned in more to his healing in 1.x. I would have carved him out a niche, I guess, but I think the most interesting part of Keqing nowadays, in terms of like where you can use him, is that his cryo application is fast, but short, kind of like Xiao. So I do think there's like interesting interactions with that, right? The way that you can do 5 melt Maoika with Keqing. I kind of don't like how kind of RNG and also mostly ping dependent it is. I think that does take a hit. I still don't think he's a particularly interesting kit, so I'm gonna put him in B. B for boring. Just hopped in, and do I see fischl kit design as S? Yeah. Sometimes simple is best. Fischl's kit is very simple, but what do you think S stands for? My biggest gripe with diluc is that it's kind of difficult to separate his design from his balance. So much of what makes diluc what he is as a unit is just a byproduct of his abilities sucking so much. Diluc's skill is barely better than doing normal attack. And you can make the argument, well, you still want to use the skill because, well, it barely better is still better, but more importantly, it generates energy, and energy is good. But then, Diluc's burst is also fucking dog shit. Diluc's kit is the most incoherent shit in the game. I don't think it's that incoherent. You have a burst, gives you an infusion, and then with that infusion, you start hitting the enemies and weaving in skills in between. It's insanely incoherent if you play him in plunge, which you do. Yeah, but that's not really a design flaw. That's a balance flaw. If a character is so dogshit in their intended design space, you want to just use them as a skin for Xianyun carry, then that's not a design issue. That's a balance issue. What do you think he was just randomly given such a high plunge number? I mean, he was the only 5-star Claymore in 1.0. It makes sense for Claymores to have a higher plunge multiplier than other weapon types. How long did it take for us to get another 5-star Claymore character? How much worse is her plunge multiplier? I don't actually know. But like, you can make the argument that Eula's kit design is supposed to be centered around maximizing her burst, not around using her normal attacks. Whereas Diluc's kit design is about finding the balance between the normal attacks and the skill. So I think it makes sense for Diluc plunge multiplier to be higher. Then the next one is Ito, who's also like entirely centered around his charge attack. So again, I think it makes sense. The next one was... And then the next one was Navia. But by the time they balanced Navia, they already knew they were making Xianyun. So like at that point, balancing numbers around Xianyun's existence makes sense. I think that's why he ended up with such a high plunge multiplier. Like, it just made sense at the time for him to be higher. And by the time other characters that would have made sense for their plunge multipliers to also be higher came out, Xianyun existed, so they balanced it around her. Do you think it was designed to be mono pyro and not vapor melt with how his burst works? Not necessarily. I think he was designed to be versatile. He was designed so that you would be able to use him in pretty much every archetype. I don't think Diluc is like that bad of a design. Like, I think the biggest problem is his burst does not fit the direction Genshin took. And his numbers suck. But the numbers sucking isn't really a design thing. It's a balance thing, so we can dismiss that. So it's basically just the burst. The thing with the burst is, like, we have to understand that Diluc came out in, what was it, 2021? When did Genshin come out? I don't even fucking know. Right? Like, Diluc was designed in 2020, right? It's been fucking almost 6 years now. And at the time, monoliths were an important part of the endgame content. And as much as Diluc's verse sucks, it is useful for monoliths. So it kind of makes sense. The fact that his infusion is tied to the burst means that you have to use it even in other chambers, and it doesn't feel good to use in other chambers. I definitely still think his design is bad. I just don't think it's as bad as some of you guys think. Like, a lot of the issues with Diluc's design come from his flaws feeling worse because he's just not good. Right, there's units that were released more recently that I think have pretty major kit design issues, but people don't regard them as poorly designed because, well, when a unit does over 100k DPS, you don't give a fuck about how bad the design is. Anyways, I'll put Diluc in here. I think he doesn't warrant the F tier. I think. Not yet. Rasor. Okay, this is something I talked about in the Rasor witch buff video. Rasor 1.0 design had so many glaring issues, so many parts of his kit that just didn't function, and they basically fixed everything with the witch buff. I think Razor's a really cool unit now. They kind of haven't. No, I think they very much did. Stuff like wrong Ascension passive. Again, Ascension passive, as far as I'm concerned, is not a design issue. It's just a balance issue. I get slightly annoyed. I mean, that's fair, but like, meh. Is there a reason why we ignore Noelle current performance but consider witch buff for Mona and Razor? It's not that we ignore Noelle current performance, it's that Noelle current performance, it's that we're not looking at performance in general, right? Like, we could talk about the geo application for Noelle, I guess, but I don't think that really changes her placement here. I think Razor's kit is very interesting, right? He's a character that sacrifices energy generation to the team to get energy generation for himself. That also has flexibility that allows him to generate more energy to the team if you want. Like, if all you want is to generate as much energy as possible with no regards to field time and whatnot, Razor's got some insane energy generation. Because you can hold E, Q, swap back in, hold E again. Or if you have sack, you can hold E twice, Q, swap back in, hold E again. I just think that Razor's kit is really fucking cool. The way he gives himself ER, the way he gives himself energy, it's just so cool. Anyways, I think Razor kit design is ass. No, I really like his kit design. Alright, next is Bennett. Bennett is fucking weird. There's so many great things about Bennett's kit design and so many awful things about Bennett's kit design. Circle impact and 70% heal make Bennett B tier. I disagree. Unironically, I think those are great parts of his design. This is something I've talked about the last time I talked about Bennett design. Bennett's whole gimmick, design-wise, is clumsy, unlucky, and whatnot, right? In 1.0, he was also the only pyro healer. When you think of the ways that fire is used in medicine, in like proper hospital medicine, heat is used to like disinfect shit and whatnot. But in like battlefield type medicine, like fire is used for cauterization. And that shit hurts. So I think that like flavor wise, and here I'm using flavor in the same sense that flavor is used for card games. I don't know if it's used very much outside of card games, but like flavor is like how does this gameplay element tie into lore and or what this is supposed to be, right? It's used in MMOs too? Okay, bet. But yeah, flavor-wise, Bennett being a character that only heals characters when they're low HP makes sense, because you're not going to cauterize a wound if it's not that bad. Like, you're not going to submit yourself to that shit for no reason. Bennett, like, sometimes not healing you to full also kind of makes sense for the same reason, right? I just think that it's cool for him to be a character that has a condition for his healing that's a bit different, and that makes sense flavor-wise. I think that's very nice. I think that's cool. I like it. But that's not really what this is about, right? We're not talking about flavor. We're talking about just kit design as a whole. And flavor kind of matters to that, but it's a pretty minor element in my opinion. Bennett carry's kit design is really cool if it wasn't for the C6. Bennett's C6 makes his carry playstyle so weird. And it's not that it's bad, because C6 Bennett carry is better than non-C6 Bennett carry. At C6, Bennett can't really play melt anymore. And I don't like his strongest archetype for carry Bennett before C6 stops being playable if you activate his constellation. Like, we talk about characters that get cooked by Bennett C6. Bennett shouldn't be included in that list. Bennett shouldn't be a carry that gets cooked by his own C6. Like, I can fucking excuse it if it's other characters, but if it's himself, like, what the fuck? I think his skill with the like alternate options for it is very interesting because it generates a different amount of energy. You can use Bennett hold skill as a way to reliably get 3 particles from this skill instead of relying on the RNG. And I think that's cool. I actually really like that a character that's usually supposed to generate a certain amount of particles has an alternative to generate more particles if you need them. Was Bennett the first character to do that? Like without the use of sack weapons or anything like that? I think he was, right? I mean, I guess not. I guess like Venti too, but Venti's fake. Like that is not real. Razor 2 as well, I suppose. Kea, it's not an alternative, it's just an extra with a condition that is not on him, right? It's about the rest of the team. So that C2 is never active, yeah. This one is very dumb, I agree. I mean, it's good with Farina, but that's it. Yeah, the Bennett C2 is definitely stupid. No, he goes in A. I think the downsides of Circle Impact and the Self-Pyro app are enough to take him from B to A. It makes him a little bit more dynamic and interesting kit design-wise. Ning. Oh man. Ning is a character that on which I have probably the most polarized opinion. She's both incredibly cool and incredibly cooked. They gave her so many interesting tools in her kit and in her constellations, and then they coded her to be the worst fucking abomination you've ever seen. Ning's normals and charge, right? Like generating the Star Jade and then using the Charge Jades to get that special charge attack. It's a relatively straightforward but kind of cool. The burst by itself is alright too. But I think what really makes Ning interesting is her skill. And it's not even the skill, actually. It's the C2. Resetting skill cooldown when you break the skill creates a really, really cool mechanic with Ning, where if you use your skill, you get your thing at the start here, and you can just get two...
Don't waste my time. Submit!
2 skills every time you swap to her like this, if you swap to her every 12 seconds. Or, you can get the skill, and then another skill, burst skill. And you can front load one of your extra skills. And if you don't have the burst, you can just use the skill every 6 seconds like this. One of the biggest problems with Ning, if you use the skill, right, at 4 seconds, you get the particles. Use it again at 11 seconds, you get the particles and the cooldown reset. I'll just do 7 seconds so that I right? And you can get the particles every time. But if you use it before 6 seconds, you don't get the set of particles. Which means that the optimal way to play Ning, assuming that you care about the energy and you can afford to swap multiple times, you swap to her, you do EQ, whatever, and you do other stuff, whatever, whatnot, cool, Pog, and then later you do another E. I didn't wait. Oh, I did wait, yeah. Wait, no, I didn't. Wait, how do you have to do it again? Right, you have to E.
Give up.
And then...
Don't waste my time.
Wait, no, you can't do this. Am I an idiot? Yeah, I'm an idiot. Oh, no, you can.
It's nothing.
No, you can't. Okay, yeah, I'm dumb. Like, I think that the biggest issue with Ning is that she has particle generation ICD. I wish that if you EQ E to give you the energy. And yeah, there's also the N1 RNG, but like, that's that's whatever, man. I think Nick gets cooked by her coding, but like that's not really design. But like it also kind of is. The amount of particles generated by a skill, I don't think is a design thing. I think it's a balance thing. Yes or no, binary, does your skill generate energy in this situation, I think is a design thing and not a balance thing. And so because of that, I think that the way that Ning's skill has particle generation ICD really hurts her design. But I still think she's fairly cool, so she might still make it into the A tier. Probably not. I think she goes into B. Beidou is another one of the victims of 1.0 having a lot of different design directions for characters and only delivering on some of them. Parries don't work in Genshin. Genshin combat is all about maximizing DPS, and parries on any character that is not an on-fielder just can't function. Because you have to swap to your support at the right time in your rotation, and you have to use their abilities, whether they parry or not. Parry is a mechanic that, within Genshin's combat system, has to be put either on characters that are meant to quick swap, or on carries. And Beidou is neither of those, because her skill cooldown is too long for a quick swap thing. Her on-field ability is really bad, because so much of her value can be capitalized on off-field. And again, right, this is another one of these weird nuances where sometimes numbers on a character's kit are design and not balance. I think very often cooldowns can be either of them. For example, Xiao burst cooldown being 18 instead of 15 or instead of 20 isn't a design thing. It's a balance thing. Not that it really matters, but if it were a problem, it would be a balance thing. With Beidou, though, skill cooldown being, what is it, 7.5 or some shit, weird ass number, instead of like 1 or 2 so that you can spam it, is a design thing. In my opinion, if you want to make a character that is supposed to be having a relevant parry, you need to make the non-parry version of the ability really bad, and the parry version very powerful. Because you need to actively adjust your rotation to swap to them. You need to swap out of your carry if you want to get a parry on a non-carry character. And that needs to be worth it. Only other unit with a parry is Yunjin. Yunjin and Candace. Sounds a bit annoying from a balance version. Imagine they do 150k with parry times 4 and 120k without. I mean, yeah. I think that's fine. Like, Genshin already has characters that are way better or way worse depending on matchups. And I think that having that be a natural result of the character's kit doing something specific rather than just, yes, this enemy outright forces you to bring X thing that this team doesn't have would be more interesting. I think it just tends to inherently be more fun as a player when certain characters become indirectly better as a result of enemy design rather than certain characters becoming directly better, aka Lunar doing 3x damage, or some characters being directly worse, aka enemies having 350 Dendro resistance. It just tends to be more fun from a player point of view when it's like, this enemy is very aggressive, so you want to be bringing characters that can deal with that. Characters that aren't too squishy, or if we ended up getting a parry carry, characters that can capitalize on that aggressive. It's not that Genshin needs to have a carry that's designed around a parry mechanic. It's just that, well, we're talking about Beidou, who has a parry mechanic. And because we're talking about Beidou, we have to talk about how a parry mechanic could actually work in Genshin. And I don't think that Beidou's parry mechanic works. The burst, I mean, Beidou's burst is cool, honestly. I think Beidou's burst is actually really interesting. I think you're interesting, Mr. Zajef. Wow. Thank you. That makes me smile. I think the skill is a big miss, but I think the burst is cool enough to warrant B. B for Beidou. Next is Keqing. Honestly, her kit is pretty cool. Keqing is a character that doesn't directly have a lot of flexibility, but that indirectly has flexibility. The only aspect of her kit that like outright says you have the choice between doing X or Y is the skill, where you have the choice between doing double skill or skill charge attack. The way that her kit functions indirectly allows some flexibility as well, because the skill cooldown doesn't line up in a way where you can do 2 skills per burst if you burst off cooldown, which incentivizes either using TF on her, accepting that not lining up very well. So much of her power being in the charge attack is also, it allows her some flexibility within her ability to either infuse her normal attacks or not. I just think that she's pretty neat. The biggest issue with Keqing, that her charge attack has a lot of knockback and it's such a good source of damage for her, And it feels really bad when you can't do charge attack. But maybe that's fine. Again, right, I'd rather have a character that indirectly is worse as a byproduct of one of the elements of their kit, rather than having characters be directly countered. Keqing probably goes in B. Nah, she can go in A, I think. I think that might be it for today. I do want to continue this tomorrow, though.